You're about to hear some of the most shocking things you'll ever hear in your entire life. And you may find that hard to believe, given the utter horrors many of you will have encountered during Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. This will be very difficult to hear. It's certainly very difficult to talk about, but we have to bear witness because these are crimes being committed with a direct facilitation of Western governments. And they will only end when people in the West, when we use our collective power to stop them. Israel is deliberately targeting Palestinian children. That's the conclusion of a new detailed report published by United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry. Not children accidentally killed, not children killed because of recklessness. Israel is deliberately killing and maiming Palestinian children. I'm going to start with this example. And it's an example described by an Indian lawyer and former Indian judge serving as a UN Commissioner on Human Rights.
I must share with all of you that apart from the sources that we've quoted in the report, we also conducted oral hearings after we arrived here in Geneva this time. And 3 of the doctors who were involved in treatment of children in Gaza spoke to us. And they confirmed what the report has found on the basis of available material, that the gunshot wounds were specifically directed at the head and the neck to cause maximum damage. In one instance, a breastfeeding baby was shot by a quadcopter through the head, and the baby now suffers a permanent paralysis. So there have been all these instances quoted in the report of specific targeting of children. Quadcopters, as all of you are aware, has thermal imagery. It has infrared heat cameras which can tell you the shape of the body. And so the soldiers are able to immediately detect, sitting wherever they are, that this is a child who appears on the screen. And indeed, it is like a game for them. And we have quoted that in the report, where the soldiers say that they can... let me quote this. In the IT documentary Breaking Ranks Inside Israel's War, one Israeli soldier described, "The drones, in my opinion, are what most dehumanizes the other side. You see everything on a screen. You drop the bomb. It feels like a game. You can sit in some basement of a house, safe, with your helmet off, scratching your balls, half-dressed, and kill Palestinians." This is a quotation. This is why I say Israeli soldiers have themselves put on the public domain so much incriminating evidence about what they've been doing.
Just take some time to process that. An Israeli quadcopter shot a baby in the head while the baby was breastfeeding. What words exist in the English language to describe such a crime? As he noted, these Israeli soldiers have thermal imagery and infrared heat cameras on those quadcopters. They know exactly who they're targeting when they launch these attacks. Before we discuss more of the contents of the report, listen to Chris Sidoti. He's an Australian expert on international human rights law who is also a commissioner who authored this report.
The hardest decision we had to make in completing this report was the decision not to name the Palestinian children whose deaths, injuries and suffering we describe. It was a hard decision because children have a right under the Convention of the Rights of the Child to a name and an identity. And one of the difficulties in dealing with public understanding of the situation in Gaza and the West Bank is that these children are anonymised. They're anonymised in the statistics themselves of tens of thousands of children affected in this way. And they're certainly entitled to be recognised, to be named in death. We didn't name them because we feared the consequences for their families. We have a basic fundamental principle not to add further harm to the harm that people have already suffered. And it was hard for us not to name these children. But my final comment is to plead with us all to see these children, to see them as individuals with identities, with lives that they must have been enjoying at least before October 2023, and futures that have now been cut short. And to see in these children our own children and grandchildren, because this is a universal issue. This is not merely a Palestinian issue. It's an issue that should affect us all.
Just take a moment to process what he said. This UN commission took the decision not to name Palestinian children killed and maimed by the Israeli army, whose suffering they have documented because they fear the Israeli army will inflict vengeful reprisals against their families if they are identified. What sort of evil are we discussing here? When the UN has to strip away the identities of children deliberately killed and maimed by the Israeli army for fear that their families will then be killed and maimed as well. This evil is armed and backed and facilitated by the West, by our governments. As Zachary Foster, a Jewish American historian, puts it, we only know about a fraction of Israeli atrocities because Palestinians know if they speak out, they'll be punished, arrested, tortured, or raped to death. Listen now to this atrocity which happened in the illegally occupied West Bank.
He was shot by an Israeli military patrol as he was leaving his house. The patrol had been in the area, but at the time there had been no fighting taking place. He was shot, badly injured, and was lying on the ground. He was surrounded by a company of Israeli soldiers who were chatting and probably some of them smoking over a period of 45 minutes while this 14-year-old boy bled to death. Early in the period, he was able to move a little. He pushed his cap out to indicate that he was still alive and needed attention. A soldier kicked the cap back at him. On another occasion, he was crying out, and again the response was kicking towards him. Later in the period, a soldier came up and dropped a stone next to him, trying to frame this innocent child as a stone thrower, when there is no evidence whatsoever that the child was doing anything more than going out to play. His mother was watching from the house that he'd just left, and as the child sought to leave the house, as the mother sought to leave the house to go to the child to rescue him or attend to him, she was shot at by the Israeli military patrol. There was a Palestinian Red Cross ambulance nearby, and whenever the ambulance tried to approach the scene of the child lying there, a laser-targeted weapon was aimed at the driver of the ambulance so that the laser was hitting the driver in the middle of the head, and the driver, of course, withdrew in fear of being shot. For 45 minutes, this child bled to death while surrounded by Israeli soldiers who not only showed no concern for him whatsoever, not only did nothing themselves to assist the child, but actively prevented the child's mother from reaching him and the ambulance from assisting him.
The Israeli army shot a 14-year-old Palestinian boy. When his mother rushed to his help, they shot at her. Then they put a red laser on the head of a paramedic who tried to save his life, stopping them from helping him. This 14-year-old boy bled to death in front of his mother, surrounded by Israeli soldiers who did nothing to help him and showed no concern about a boy they had shot bleeding to death in front of them. We're going to go through some horrific examples, the big picture. According to this report, at least 20,179 Palestinian children were killed and 44,143 injured in Gaza between the 7th of October 2023 and 7th of October 2025. Children made up 30% of those killed and 26% of those injured. Bear in mind that this is almost certainly a very significant underestimate. Save the Children, for example, estimate that there were another 5,160 children buried under the rubble. But nonetheless, children made up 30% of those killed in the figures we have in Gaza, 26% of those injured. And even based on these conservative estimates, that means 1 in every 50 children in Gaza were violently killed by the Israeli army. This is also excluding those who died from indirect means, the destruction of the healthcare system, lack of food, water. We could go on. Of those we know were killed, 5,031 were under 5 years old. 1,029 were under the age of 1. And around 420 newborns were violently killed. Now, the assaults on children goes much broader. 459 of Gaza's 564 school buildings were directly hit by the Israeli army by October 2025. These are buildings which had served nearly 500,000 students and over 18,000 teachers. Over 97% of schools damaged or destroyed, and the children in Gaza have now missed 3 years of formal education. Nearly 95,000 children identified with acute malnutrition in 2025. Just some of the examples of suffering. Now I'm going to talk about some more case studies. One is a case study you may well have heard of. It's one I have spoken about myself on this channel. 5-year-old Hind Rajab, trapped in a car with other family members, including other children, including her cousin, 15-year-old Liam. And they were attacked by the Israeli army. The adults were all killed. Liam called the Palestine Red Crescent, gunfire was heard, and then she was likely killed. Hind then later herself rang the Palestine Red Crescent while injured. An ambulance was then dispatched after coordinating with the Israeli army, but it was then attacked and blown up by the Israeli army, killing both the paramedics. The bodies were recovered 12 days later. The commission has concluded that the Israeli security services deliberately targeted this family car despite knowing children were inside, and then prevented their rescue by shelling the ambulance and killing the paramedics. Now, Forensic Architecture, a brilliant team of experts based at the University of London, did their own detailed investigation of this case. They looked at how many bullets, at least it was well over 300 bullet holes in the car that they could identify. It was in broad daylight, and it was just a few meters away, the tank from the car. There was no way on earth that these Israeli soldiers did not know who they were targeting. In Khan Yunis, a 15-year-old boy stepped out of the home of his family holding a white cloth. He was shot in the foot, then shot again in the back and the neck. His 20-year-old brother ran to help him, and they shot him dead as well. His mother tried to signal for an ambulance to save her 2 boys, and she was shot in the hand. According to the commission, the 15-year-old was likely shot by sniper rifle from around 200 meters away. The shooter should have been able to see he was a child holding a white flag. In Khan Yunis, a 4-year-old girl shot in the head while eating with her family in the tent. No one else in the family was injured. She survived, but the left side of her body paralysed. The commission concluded she was targeted by a quadcopter mounted with an assault rifle. After the October 2025 so-called ceasefire, in which Israel has not ceased firing. In fact, they've killed hundreds of Palestinians. And in this one example, 2 brothers aged 10 years old and 9 years old were killed by an Israeli drone strike near Khan Yunis while gathering firewood for their father, who is in a wheelchair. Israeli forces said they were suspects and an immediate threat. The commission rejects these claims, noting they were more than 300 meters away from Israeli soldiers, were visibly and clearly children, and were collecting firewood. In Sheikh Radwan, the report says Israeli soldiers threw 4 grenades into a house with 30 family members, badly injuring a 5-year-old boy. Israeli forces then entered and shot dead 8 family members, including his parents, and did not provide medical assistance. A doctor at a school reinserted the children's exposed intestines using diapers and tape. He later needed multiple surgeries and left with permanent disability. His 6-year-old brother also survived. Both had witnessed their parents' killing, including their pregnant mother being shot dead. The report also describes the decomposing bodies of 4 babies found in Al Nasser Pediatric Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit after staff were forced to evacuate and couldn't safely move the most vulnerable infants. The babies were reportedly still attached to life support equipment rendered useless by the electricity outage and attacks. The Commission says the video is digitally verified and notes Israel did not even claim Al Nasser Pediatric Hospital was used by Hamas, as they've done with other attacks on hospitals. Then there was a 15-year-old boy held at the notorious Dei Taiman detention centre, which is just this hideous, nightmarish prison of torture and rape and murder. He was the only child among 70 adults. He was shackled until his hands bled, punished by being forced to stand for hours and terrorised with dogs. Another 15-year-old detained from Gaza said he was denied water, told to drink urine, beaten, interrogated, electrocuted through a needle, inserted into his shoulder, deprived of food and water, and forced into painful positions. Listen to this now from the British surgeon Niam Namod, who served in Gaza, responding to the report.
On this visit you've just made, compared to when you were there before, what is the level of trauma that people have suffered? And how I mean, it seems like such a simple question, but how are people coping and surviving?
I think they just go day by day. So one of my Palestinian colleagues, whilst we were there, on 3 occasions, the car ahead of him was targeted by a missile and blown up. And he was quite shaken on the first occasion because he said 20 metres, that could have been me killed. By the 3rd occasion, he'd become resigned to it and said, well, if it's my time, it's my time. This is the kind of thing that people are facing on a daily basis, even though there's supposed to be a ceasefire.
Is it difficult coming back?
Yes.
How do you feel when you return after what you've experienced and been through? It must be so hard.
I think I feel quite angry that this country, which traditionally has stood for justice and has stood up for the oppressed, has an international reputation for doing that, is letting this genocide go by and doing nothing about it.
That's what he's emphasising here, our complicity. His own government is complicit in these crimes. Our government is complicit in these crimes. There's so much overwhelming evidence separate from this report about the deliberate targeting of children. Even the New York Times, which has whitewashed Israel's genocide, they published a report back in 2024 based on the testimonies of dozens of US-based doctors, nurses, and paramedics. And they testified that Palestinian children were being shot in the head and in the chest. Now, this is so hideous. They had the evidence. The New York Times published it with evidence, including x-rays and all the rest of it. There was then a deliberate attempt online by pro-Israel propagandists to claim that this was fabricated. And the New York Times had to release their own clarification, going through the evidence showing the incontrovertible truth of what these dozens of US-based doctors, nurses, paramedics had said. In another example, Dr. Nick Maynard, a British doctor, he, on this channel, testified to me about how when he was serving in Gaza, each day, young boys, children, would come in with injuries to different parts of their anatomy. On one day, boys would come in, they'd all been shot in the head, on another, the neck, and another, the chest, on the other, the testicles. His conclusion were those Israeli soldiers must have been playing a game. Let's shoot a different part of people's anatomy, of boys, young boys, Palestinian boys. Let's shoot a different part of their anatomy each day. Listen to this as well from a Jewish American doctor who served in Gaza.
When were you in Gaza?
End of April for the first couple weeks. And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
In 2024, the NGO Defence for Children International published a report documenting 141 Palestinian children killed by Israeli forces and settlers in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, between 7th October 2023 and the 31st of July 2024. 116 of the 141 children were shot dead with live ammunition or by snipers. The NGO says that nearly all were shot in the head or torso and 18 were shot in the back, which it says describes a crystal clear indicator that the child posed no threat. The report's visual summary says 90% of those 116 children were struck in the head, torso, or multiple areas, and DCIP says that indicates shooters targeted them with intent to kill. It says there's no evidence warnings were issued or less lethal measures attempted. The evidence, they say, indicates that Israeli forces in practice have a policy in place that amounts to willful killing. They say Israeli forces are deliberately targeting Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank. Now, the BBC's failure on Israel's genocide are overwhelming. I've documented them. Many of you may have read or heard what I've written or what I've done on this video channel. Catastrophic complicity with Israel's genocide. But the BBC World Service did this study in 2025.
The BBC World Service has compiled material on over 160 cases where children have been shot in Gaza and found that in 95 cases, the child was shot in the head or the chest. In most of these cases, the victim was under 12 years old. The cases we found run from the first weeks of the war up to July this year.
Just to repeat, in 95 of the 160 cases, the child was shot in the head or the chest. Israel is deliberately murdering children. It's deliberately targeting children. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. I mean, there is case closed. There's nothing more to even add on that in a tangible sense to defend the claim. There is overwhelming evidence on a mass scale that the Israeli state is deliberately killing children in Gaza and in the West Bank and in other occupied territories. The deliberate killing of Palestinian children by the Israeli state. That's what we're talking about. There is nothing more evil, is there, really? Not on the grand scale of things. Or to deliberately murder children. You know, we had the fake lie that Israeli children were beheaded on the 7th of October, which was used to justify the genocide. And there was infinitely more outrage over that falsehood than there is at the actual mass deliberate killing of Palestinian children by an Israeli state armed to the teeth by the West. These crimes are directly facilitated by those who represent us and who claim to speak in our name. We have to stop this. We have to stop this. Because it's not just the fate of the Palestinian people here at stake. If we normalise this barbarism, there is no hope for our species, our civilization. If we normalise the deliberate killing of children. So we have to keep speaking out. We can't stay silent in the face of these unspeakable crimes. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments. Help us take on a media which has facilitated genocide at patreon.com/unjustly. Share the video. And yeah, we've got lots more coverage to come, including, of course, on the genocide. We'll never stop speaking about Gaza or Palestine. But yeah, share the video. I'll speak to you soon.